One thing I find fascinating about this current economic downturn that we are going through compared to the last one that we had in 2008 is just how many businesses that you used to think were invincible and maybe would be around forever are taking big hits. In fact, I used to go to Subway all the time when I was growing up, guys, and especially after the last recession. You know, they had the $5 footlong forever, it seemed like, and that was just like the best deal you could possibly get with fast food. Like, yeah, you could go into McDonald's and maybe spend a little bit less money, but you wouldn't walk out with this giant sandwich like in Subway. Well, obviously the $5 footlong has been a thing of the past for a very long time, and now you're lucky if you get a 6-inch sub for $5. But they recently just called an emergency meeting with their franchisees due to how much the sales have been plummeting at Subway, guys. And you know, this is an unscheduled meeting. This is an emergency meeting. Like, hey, we need to wake up and start doing something about this before we're all in big trouble. So this was on August 15th that they had this meeting. It was basically over declining sales and profitability. And in their meeting, they talked about how, you know, there were significant drops in same-store sales, with some areas seeing declines as big as 10% compared to the previous year. That's a big drop for the restaurant business, especially since that's a business that runs on pretty thin margins for the most part. And when you're seeing sales come down by 10% in 1 year, it's no wonder they're ringing the alarm bell. Subway's getting hit from both ends of it, okay? Because just like so many other big corporations, they are getting hit with this massive debt crisis, okay? Because besides their same-store sales falling, they also have the interest payments on their debt. Just like every other company that has debt right now, the interest payments are higher than they were a few years ago. So it's harder to afford those payments. Now, Subway was actually just purchased by a company called Rourke Capital. They bought Subway in May of 2024 for $9 billion. And you know, one thing I've seen, I watched this YouTube channel called Company Man. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Probably a lot of you guys have seen his videos, and they're very cool because he breaks down all these businesses that have, you know, once seemed to be invincible, like Subway, and what has brought them all down. And one recurring theme with a lot of these businesses is debt. And anytime these businesses get too far into debt, or they try to get too big too fast, or they get bought by another company, like in Subway's case, that a lot of times ends up being the death blow for the company. They don't know it at the time, but tracing things back, that usually ends up being the beginning of the end for them. And this could be the beginning of the end for Subway. And of course, right away, Subway's jumping in there saying, no, this isn't an emergency meeting. You know, we always have these meetings and stuff to communicate with our franchisees. That's just a lie. Okay. But just like business owners who own McDonald's franchises, you know, the people who own Subway franchises have a lot of the same concerns right now, mainly all of these big promotions that are designed to get people back in the door that are eroding their profit margins. It's like, what are we even in business for? Why are we even doing this if you're bringing people in but you're not making any money? And even with these big discounts, here's the problem: it still has not increased the business and sales to where they were thinking that it would. A lot of stores are barely breaking even right now, guys. So imagine, you know, turning your wheels day in and day out, you know, dealing with employees, dealing with drama, dealing with things that happen at your restaurant, all to just basically make no money for the day. We paid our bills, we paid the employees, everyone's salary is paid, but that's it. Does that sound worth it to you? I, for one, certainly would not be operating a business like that. I mean, sure, every business falls on hard times sooner or later and has to get through a rough patch, but you can only go on so long like that before it completely breaks your morale and you don't want to continue. And the reason why Subway is hurting so much right now is because all these fast food brands are now competing. You know, they've always been competing, but now they're competing in a big way to draw their customers back, because they've all seen their sales fall, from McDonald's to Burger King to Wendy's and Subway. They've all seen their sales come down to the point where they have to come up with these gimmicks to get people back in the store. So already with fast food, what you're seeing is a race to the bottom. You're seeing these businesses discount the food as much as they possibly can to get people in, and even that hasn't been enough to really do much. You know, even the last time I talked about with McDonald's, all the crazy sales and promotions they've been doing has been enough to only get about an increase 6% in foot traffic in their stores. That's not very much. You know, an increase 6% in foot traffic isn't a whole lot when you're looking at how many deals and promotions they have going on. Is that really creating the jump in business that they're looking to see? I don't think so. So back to my beginning point of this video is I think a lot of brands that we all kind of grew up with and saw as like infallible and that would just kind of be around forever may not be the case moving forward into 2025 if these struggles continue. And I don't see the economy getting any better anytime soon. And as consumers continue to hunker down and just spend more and more of their income on essentials like housing and food at home and transportation, you know, it's less money they have to spend at all these places. And speaking of the cost of housing, the actual housing inflation data, according to the CPI report that we just got, is one of the last things that's still being stubborn and is not coming down like the Fed wants to see. And everybody's celebrating that the S&P 500 has recovered back to where it was, you know, before this little mini crash we had over the past couple of weeks. And, you know, there's no risk of recession. That's what people are saying. No risk, okay? Now for the July reading, shelter costs went up an additional 0.4% compared to a 0.2% increase in June. Like that's already a 0.6% increase over the past 2 months, guys. And over the past year, it's up 5% year over year. So housing costs are still continuing to rise faster than inflation, supposedly, and definitely faster than wages. And what this recent report also shows you, in case you didn't catch that, is the June reading was a 0.2% increase, and the July reading was higher, not lower, which means that shelter costs jumped in July, didn't go down. So what do you do with that, guys? How does the government and the Fed celebrate, you know, stomping out inflation when housing prices are still rising that fast? And it's not housing prices, it's the cost of shelter, which basically means, you know, your rent or your mortgage payment. And here's one of the most interesting things about this, if you ask me. You know, because you would think that some of the most important inflation data would be the fact that housing expenses continue to go up. You know, something that's a human necessity, we all have to pay for it. But the crazy thing is they're going to look at this and say, well, everything else is falling, so I think we can still cut rates in September, because even though housing expenses are still up, almost everything else is down, so that's good enough. Like, huh? And by the way, I went through the BLS report on their website, and it's not just housing that has seen some massive year-over-year jumps, guys. Also things like electricity, that was up 4.9% year-over-year. And don't forget, you're supposed to have everything electric pretty soon. So, you know, at the same time, electricity prices are still rising just as fast as shelter costs. Another big thing that we all need that's been increasing pretty substantially as well, transportation, okay? Transportation expenses are up 8.8% year over year. You know, you don't hear those stats in the news stories. All the feel-good news stories talk about how the price of ham is coming down, or, you know, something ridiculous like that. Like, how often do you go out and buy ham? I realize some people might have that as a daily staple in their diet, but most people eat ham maybe once or twice a year during like the holidays and stuff like that. So all these ridiculous things that they report on, that inflation is coming down. Oh, look at this. You know, used cars, for example. Used car prices are down 10, 11% year over year, which is great news if you want to buy a car. But how many new cars do people buy in their lifetime? You know, maybe you'll buy 5, 10 cars if you're someone that gets a new car often in your entire life. So having used car prices drop does help, but the interest rates are still high, and with everything else people have to pay for, it's still unaffordable. Here we have a house for sale for $4 million, and surprise, surprise, it's a flip. They bought it back in July of 2022 for $2 million. Then they listed it back in October of 2023, a whole year ago, for $4.5 million. So this house has been for sale for close to a year, and now they're down to $3.995. So they've taken a $500,000 haircut off the price. And this house has been sitting vacant for a year, guys. The flipping game is over. And on top of that, you have the property taxes already sitting at $21,000 a year for the current owner, but that's nothing because the new owner will be paying close to $50,000 a year in property taxes if they buy this house at this price. It is absolutely insane, and no wonder it's still sitting vacant. So now they're saying that the shelter increase is actually accounting for 90% of the CPI according to the BLS. So that's why the Fed might look at this and say, well, it's okay, we can lower rates. But the reality is, guys, like, they haven't actually beat inflation in the most important categories. I mean, food is even still at like 2 or 2.2% year over year. Not crazy like the shelter, but still it's not going down. Food costs aren't getting cheaper. So all these things that we actually need to buy, food, shelter, transportation, gas is actually coming down. I'll give them that one. And it is cheaper. Even here in California right now, I'm paying less for gas here than I ever have on all my visits in California. It's still expensive. I'm paying like $4.05 a gallon for regular, guys, but the last time I was here it was over $5 a gallon. So it is cheaper. Even when I left Florida, I think I was only paying like maybe $3.25, $3.15 a gallon in most spots. But obviously gas is only one small piece of that puzzle. If the rest of it's still going up and only gas is coming down, it still doesn't really help you that much. All the money you're saving on gas now has to go towards your higher rent and your higher taxes, your higher insurance, your higher car insurance bill, all those things that are not going down. So they're just going to use this to declare an early victory on inflation. But what you're going to see is they're going to cut rates, and inflation on these items are going to continue to rise even faster than it is now. And that's going to be where the real problems begin. You know, because then they're going to be faced with a tough decision of, do we go back to increasing rates, or do we just let the cost of housing spiral even further out of control? Now, besides all the lies that we get told by the government daily and all of the fake inflation numbers and the fake data that we have to look at, there's a couple other things that you have to look at too. You know, a lot of people are looking for an affordable place to live with how much shelter costs are up, right? And a lot of people's answer to this problem is to buy a tiny home, which is a pretty smart idea, especially if you can afford to pay for it in cash. You won't have a mortgage, you have a place where you're going to be able to park it. Then that solves pretty much all of your housing problems in one shot. But something that you have to watch out for are scams from contractors, especially anyone who wants to take all your money up front, guys. In fact, I saw a story here out of the Bay Area with this tiny home builder. I think they're called Anchored. This guy stole over $5.5 million from over 400 people, from pretty much people who all paid for building their tiny home in full. You know, anywhere from $40,000 to $80,000 in many cases. People gave this contractor to build these tiny homes, and then the guy just disappeared with all the money. Meanwhile, he's, you know, pumping out content on his social media, making it look like this guy's living in the lap of luxury, which he probably is on your dime. And so one thing that you guys need to be aware of, like if you're somebody who wants to build a house or a tiny house or anything like that, when you're dealing with a developer or a contractor, you should never pay the whole amount up front, guys. And if they ask you for this, it's a massive red flag. And I'm sure all of these people who did this are regretting this big time right now, and there may be no recourse for them. Sure, this guy may end up in jail, but if he spent all the money, you know, all the money's gone. It's basically the same playbook as FTX. You know, we're going to collect everyone's money, pretend that we're using it to buy crypto, when in fact we're just using it to completely fund our lavish lifestyle. You know, this scam is becoming more and more common as more people get greedier, more people thinking that they're going to live the millionaire or billionaire lifestyle, and they find out it's really hard work to become a millionaire or a billionaire, so they figure out a scam and an easy way to just scheme people out of their money instead. You know, I had another one of my viewers who's a real estate agent out of Florida write me an email talking about how slow business has been. You know, she works up in the Port St. Lucie area, all the way from Brevard down to Palm Beach County. So she serves a pretty big area over there on the east coast of Florida. She also does side work like performing inspections for homeowners insurance providers, as well as performing BPOs for some local banks. Okay, so that's actually more work than I ever did as a real estate agent. I just exclusively sold and rented properties. I never had these side hustles in the real estate industry. And she says it's still not enough to make ends meet right now. She said all of her business has slowed down to the point where she's being forced to get a regular job. She even signed up with my referral network because I have a referral network of agents across the country. So she signed up with that, but it's still not enough. She still needs to make more money. She says that all the realtors are scrambling to get the listings, and then once they do get the listing, it just sits on the market longer than usual because the inventory in Florida is absolutely exploding right now, so that's not really a surprise either. And she said it looks like the only properties that are really moving right now are really the high dollar listings, which, because when you're spending over $5 million, people in that category have the money no matter what. You're seeing all sorts of listings getting their price cut by thousands and thousands of dollars every single day, and they're still not selling. He says, I don't like where things are headed right now, and I was lucky I had some money saved in a high yield savings account and other investments, but at this rate of inflation, that's not going to last very much longer. So I do feel sorry for her that this is happening, and it's very unfortunate, but I cannot say I'm surprised, especially being in the real estate business right now is one of the worst industries to be in because of how much sales have slowed down, guys. Like, you guys have heard me say this before, but sales are on track to slow down to the lowest level ever recorded in 2024. 2023 was already the lowest level since they've been keeping track. 2024 is on track to be even worse than that. So you really don't want to be in the sales business of any kind right now. And of course, there's always going to be people in the industry that are doing well and saying, well, this isn't happening where I live and blah, 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 blah. But it doesn't matter. I'm sharing with you guys the stories of real people that this stuff is happening to. Whether or not you choose to listen to it and acknowledge that this is someone else's reality is up to you. William sent me a picture of his insurance going up recently, and he said he's seen his insurance go up by about $300 a year for his house, and he has about a $3,300 deductible for his homeowner's insurance. So not crazy, but also not that cheap either. But the fact that William had to write this to me tells me that a regular person living in South Dakota, that's where William lives, by the way, who sees their homeowner's insurance go up by almost $300 a year is a big deal to them. It may not be a big deal to you if you make a lot of money or you live in a very high cost of living area, but the fact that it's a big enough deal to someone for them to write me an email and make me aware of it and share it with you guys is something to pay attention to. I don't look down on anybody, guys. I know what it's like to have a hard time coming up with that $300. So I'll never be making fun or picking on people for that and telling them that they're lazy or they should make more money or whatever, because you never know people's circumstances. But on top of that, he sent me this letter from the insurance company showing you all the different other types of coverages that they're offering to him besides what he already has, trying to get him to spend even more money. Things that you wouldn't even think, guys, like even cybersecurity insurance, for in case you get your identity stolen, which could be a big deal, especially now that we heard about, this whole thing where millions of Americans had their social security number stolen recently. They offer insurance for things like jewelry and furs. Even if you live in an HOA, they have insurance for that. Like, there are just so many different types of coverage that they try to get people to buy. It's not even funny. So not only are these insurance companies raising everyone's premiums, 15, 30% in many cases, but also they want to sell you more coverage than ever before for things that aren't covered. These insurance companies are desperate too, just like everybody else. And as far as I'm concerned, guys, until we hear about the cost of all these things going down, and until people start writing me emails saying, hey, my homeowner's insurance just went down by $300 a year, then I think things are going to be continuing to get worse for a while. And it's going to continue to get worse before it gets better. And believe me, I look forward to when that starts happening, and you will see a shift in my content once things actually are starting to get better, to reflect that and to report on that. But until then, you need to make sure that you are ready for any type of increase on anything right now, whether it's your housing costs, whether it's your insurance costs, whether it's your monthly grocery budget. I don't care what it is, you have to be ready to absorb some of these increases, guys, because they're not slowing down. As much as the government likes to tell us that these inflation numbers are down and it's below 3% now, you know, for the average person, everything is still getting more and more expensive. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.